Thank you for joining us for the webcast, Groundbreaking Employee Engagement and Brand Research with Kantar TNS and Second City Works, sponsored by Kantar TNS. Before we begin, I would like to remind you that this webcast has been pre-approved for HRCI credit and can also be used for SHRM credit. Please be sure to complete the entire webcast in order to from hr.com, and we will follow up with you. And now it's my pleasure to turn it over to our first presenter, Scott Spade.
Hello, everybody. As Kathy said, I'm Scott Spade from Kantar TNS, and I host Kantar TNS webinars. First off, I want to tell you a little bit about Kantar TNS. So we help our clients reach higher levels of business performance and brand growth by creating memorable experiences for both employees and customers. It is these experiences that lead to memorable employer and customer brand, which impacts business performance and growth. So how do we do that? Well, it starts with strategic listening and continuous improvement actions by both leaders and employees. I'll give you a quick example. At a recent engagement workshop in Chicago, I was talking with the director of HR from a retail organization. When I asked about their continuous listening measures, he said that they conduct routine new hire, engagement, and exit surveys. When I asked how they link those three sets of data, he simply said, "We don't." So Kantar TNS provides a comprehensive strategy along with employee and customer survey and reporting systems that are personalized to your organization's overall strategy and values. This customization allows our customers to measure the right areas, link the right data, and act on the right insights. We're passionate about seeing our clients engage their top talent, improve their customer experience, have fun at work, and grow their brand in an ever-changing world. So while you listen to our two presenters, Brittany and Kelly, today, I challenge you to consider two things. Number one, what are you doing to create memorable moments for both your employees and your customers? And number two, what continuous listening and improvement strategies do you have in place today? So while you ponder those two questions, I'd like to first introduce Dr. Brittany Aguilar. As a director of Kantar TNS, Dr. Aguilar designs world-class consulting programs and advises clients on high-profile measurement projects. Brittany effectively crafts highly competitive employee and customer experiences that increase engagement, help to bring her clients' employee value proposition to life. Brittany has her doctorate in business psychology and master's in industrial organizational psychology with over 10 years of experience in both corporate and academic settings. She teaches graduate level organizational attitudes and survey design, international human resources strategy, and organizational leadership. Brittany has worked as an executive coach for senior HR directors and C-suite leaders, and as the internal lead of an employee engagement program for a Fortune 100 company. In 2017, Brittany is touring major U.S. cities, hosting workshops and panel discussions with industry experts to explore the link between employee engagement, brand, and talent strategy. So interviewing Brittany today about the research is Kelly Leonard from Second City. Kelly Leonard is the Executive Director of Insights and Applied Improvisation at Second City Works, overseeing the Behavioral Science and Improvisation Initiative with the Center for Decision Research at the Booth School of Business. His book, Yes and, was published to critical acclaim by HarperCollins. Kelly has spoken at Aspen Ideas Festival, Microsoft, and TEDx Broadway, and hosts the podcast Getting to Yes and for WGN and Second City. For over 20 years, Kelly oversaw Second City's live theatrical divisions, working with such talent as Tina Fey, Stephen Colbert, Amy Poehler, Seth Meyers, Keegan-Michael Kay, and others. You can find Kelly on Twitter at KL Second City. I'll now hand it over to Kelly to introduce what we're doing today for the webinar and get things started.
Thanks, Scott. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Second City and Kantar TNS have done a lot of work together over the last few years, and we thought it might be an interesting kind of mashup to have me interview Brittany in the style of that weekly podcast that we do called Getting to Yes and. Ironically, our next podcast, it appears every Tuesday. Our next one's with Alan Alda, the actor you might remember from MASH, and we explore the work that he's doing using improvisation to get scientists to communicate more effectively. That's what he's been doing for the last few years. I am not going to make Brittany run an improv exercise right now because I've talked to her before and she communicates very clearly. So we're going to jump into it. Hi, Brittany.
Hi, thank you.
So I was going over your research in preparation for our conversation, and a theme kept coming up. And it's not just based on your work. As Scott mentioned, we have a partnership with the Center for Decision Research at the Booth School of Business at University of Chicago. So I've been hanging out with a bunch of behavioral scientists for the last year, talking about our work in improvisation and comedy and their scientific insights. And the theme that seems to be coming up over and over again is that our brains and our behaviors tend to default to the binary, when in fact it's almost always multiple factors that are in play when we're making decisions in the world. So to simplify, I think what we're going to be talking a lot about is how we need to re-see how we see.
I think you're right, Kelly. So the central tenets of the research we're talking about today is that for so long we've been siloing how we see the data and the activities that we put value into between the employee data, right, that internal work, and then the external facing or the consumer side of research and data collection. So they've been completely separate so far, and we're really working to forge new paths and bring them together. Working with one of our other partners, Millward Brown, who is a market research company, they have been helping us understand more about the consumer side and building those brands. And what we're learning is that, as you said, re-seeing things, we see that they impact each other. So today I'll be sharing more evidence around how employee engagement has a positive impact on an organization's ability to deliver brand promise. And by that I mean, an organization may espouse that, if you come to our brand, to our hotel, we're the Ritz, you're going to have a certain kind of experience. And the extent to which they can deliver on that and fulfill that promise helps to continue to build that healthy brand so they're perceived the way they want to be and drive the kind of business results that they're looking for. And so we're seeing that employees really impact an organization's ability to kind of walk the talk of their brand. We're also going to be talking about consumer buy-in to brand and how the market research has been sharing and looking into how you build that perception of brand with your consumer base and how that's really similar to the way organizations get buy-in and get that connection with employees using their internal brands and mechanisms for the workforce. So we're really kind of reshaping how we look at these two big pockets of data and really big resources, right? We spend a ton of money building these things up and making sure that they run efficiently and at the time they're brought together.
So let's start with brand, but we're not going to just talk about brand alone. We're going to talk about brand and employee engagement. So I'm curious from a sort of impulse side or choice side, that what's going on in a consumer's brain when they choose a brand or pay for a brand or even stick with a brand?
Right. So that's a great question. Brand gets tossed around all the time, but it's really a coming together of the holistic experience that a consumer has when they're faced with whether they choose your brand or another brand. And I'll get into that a little bit more. I know I'm tossing it around just like I accused others of doing, so my apologies. But really it's these 3 points here, and this is the research done by Millward Brown, and I know you've done a lot with other scientists to come forward with these ideas as well, so we can talk about that in a moment if you'd like. But certainly it's the consumer's predisposition to choose that brand more often. So are they going to that place more times than others? It's their predisposition to pay for that brand. So, are they really seeing, if I give you $1, am I getting $1 or more's worth of value from that contribution? And then their predisposition to stick with that brand. So repeat customers, right, or even referrals is a huge driver of business and growth. So you want to make sure that not only do they come in and they feel like that was a good experience, but they're going to keep re-upping over and over with that idea. So we've seen the most successful brands share the following. Consumers feel an affinity for them. In other words, they like them. You know, I like the brand of shoes I wear. So if I say, hey, I need new shoes, I'm going to go back to that brand first every time, because I think they're meeting my needs. I think they're unique. They make a statement about me. They're dynamic and set category trends. So again, I'm kind of aligning myself with, I like these shoes, or I like, you know, this brand of cereal or something, and I think they're really cool, and they keep me, you know, looking great and feeling great. And also, I can find them easily. They're top of mind, right? If I'm thinking about what travel site I want to go to, you know, they all have cool little names, but what's going to pop in my head first? You know, what's more memorable? So all of that really boils down to meaningful, different, and salient. And these are going to be kind of our driving words when we're talking about brands this afternoon, where we build this model of what does brand really look like. So meaningful is a third of kind of this model of brand. It's the affinity and meeting needs. So really kind of that emotional connection to the brand. You know, I really like, I said that earlier, I like this brand. I have an emotional connection. Are they different? So this is that unique and dynamic piece. You know, I'm really understanding. I have, you know, an appreciation for this being something that is different, and I'm going to go there instead of somewhere else. They're differentiated for me among competition. And then salient, so that's that top of mind awareness again. So cognitively, you know, I can pull on that really quickly and retrieve that information whenever I need it. So that's really what I mean when I'm talking about brand. It's this, how do we connect at multiple points with consumers to get them to buy in, or like literally buy what we're selling.
So I know a lot of people have stressed the research on the sort of scientific relationship between brands and consumers, and that's, I think, what you're talking about here. But the other thing that you're highlighting is this other thing, right? Which is you're stressing that a brand will grow if it creates engagement among its own employees. So this isn't just like brand to audience. This is brand to, I guess, brand ambassadors, but it's employees.
Right, you're absolutely right. So when we're thinking about how does employee engagement impact brand, it's engagement in employees is really the delivery vehicle for this brand. I said before, you know, the extent to which employees at the Ritz can deliver, you know, that face-to-face, that handoff of value to people who are staying at that hotel, that's as good as the brand's going to be. You know, it's only as good as what people actually walk away with. And if you have a disengaged employee, let's say I'm at the Ritz and I really don't like, you know, the noise the children are making in the pool or something. I don't know, I haven't been to the Ritz, but I imagine that there are children. So, you know, I go and I talk to somebody and I met with someone who's there running the accommodations, and they say, oh, well, that's not my problem, you know, I can't do anything about it, and they just blow me off. That's not the caretaking I expect when I go to that brand and I'm looking for a certain experience. Whereas if I go there and even if they can't do anything about it, they're going to empathize with me and create a good experience. They're still living into that brand. They're still driving that brand. And so engagement can really be the difference from the employee side on whether or not they're willing to make that brand difference, whether they're able to deliver on that, you know, not only say, I'm so sorry to hear that, but then also go out and do something. They're connected to their environment. They're able to make a difference. And they're bought into the brand. So they see themselves as a representative of the Ritz. They see themselves as a representative, an extension of the company that you get to interface with, right? So that engagement piece is really crucial for organizations fulfilling that brand promise and growing their brand in a healthy way.
It's funny, I have two thoughts on this. One was thinking back to when I started at Second City. So my first gig here was in 1988, and I was a dishwasher, which is, by the way, not as glamorous as it sounds for everyone. It was a terrible job. And Second City in those days was actually like the floor was sticky, you could smoke in the theater, we sat everyone too close together, and we kept it too cold in the room. A lot of things that would be considered, I think, like a negative, experience. However, there was passion on the stage and passion among the employees. It was this like full of characters. And so it almost became like, in spite of, and massively successful, right? We were sold out every night, but I think it was because people came, and in spite of all those things, they just saw the most engaged employees at every facet of the theater. And then I'll connect this to an interview I did with Simon Sinek for our Second City podcast, and he told this great story about a barista at a Starbucks in the Las Vegas Four Seasons who was a complete joy to interact with. And Simon's point was that if you have a happy employee, that makes for a happy brand experience. That's kind of what you're talking about, right?
It really is. So yeah, I mean, you're talking about just an environment where everyone's contributing in their own way. They say, I'm a dishwasher, this is my part in the larger machine, and I really believe in this machine, and I want to do my part to make sure that it does everything it can do, right? So it's living to its full potential, or that this brand is completely believable and attractive to consumers. So you're really getting people to put in their most, and that's the central reason we go after engagement, right? Is so that people feel that by doing the work, they are fulfilled and they enjoy that experience. So your example reminded me of the classic kind of, prop this up to explain engagement to people story of the janitor at NASA, who, when they asked him what he was doing, and because he was scrubbing floors in a hallway at night, that kind of set the scene. And they said, what are you doing? What's your purpose here? And he said, I'm helping send men to the moon. And he was just a janitor at NASA, but he saw himself in this larger chain that helped take mankind to another planet. And I think when you're disengaged, you're thinking about, my experience is so terrible, or I really don't appreciate something that's going on, and you get further distanced from the goal of the organization. So engagement's really going to help drive that meaningful, different, and salient experience for consumers. We did some research
It's
a number. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No. I was just going to say those hierarchical sort of behaviors that we see a lot in business is sort of like everyone needs to know their. You say words like everyone needs to know their place in the business, and sometimes that has been said with a you need to know your place, which is below me, or above someone. When in fact, what you really want, you want everyone to have a sense of true ownership. So I think that idea that you sort of said of like, I have a role in sending these people to the moon, is so valuable and so purpose-driven for everyone in the organization. And it's not our first instinct to kind of go there, right? Because we're also busy trying to just get through the day. But that's a make or break kind of proposition.
Absolutely. Yeah, you nailed it. So it's not about being a cog in the wheel, right? You're not just a little piece in this giant clock and no one cares, and there's that fungibility, right? We can interchange you with a different piece. It's not about that. It's about being one of the 10,000 hands that hold something up is what that's about. So again, giving to receive, giving of your time, giving of your energy to see something you care about grow and do well, and also be impactful to others. So maybe you love seeing people be with their families and spend time around the pool, and that's another reason you're an employee of the Ritz. So we did some research. Yeah, we did some research to see what were the top 5 reasons employees even become these brand ambassadors that you mentioned. And our top 5 really have to do with, they believe that the company brand sets them apart. Their work gives them a feeling of accomplishment. Their company is environmentally responsible. So we'll talk about, really feeling that they're part of something that's important. But the 2 I want to call out is, they trusted senior leadership, so they really bought into a vision that made sense to them. They saw this tone from the top happening, right, where they believe that what they're doing works. So, NASA leadership wants to send someone to the moon, I'm bought into that. But then also that they feel valued as an employee. So they really thought that not only am I creating a good experience for others, but I'm having one too.
So I'm curious because, again, spending all these time with scientific nerds at the University of Chicago is they always want to know what the research is, what's the data, what's backing this up. Are there case studies, white papers? What's some of the other stuff that you've got that sort of backs up the findings?
Yeah, absolutely. So the research I quoted, we highlighted in another webinar that we did a few months ago with our CEO, Mike Schrader, and LinkedIn. So that's chock full of information, and I don't want to rehash it, but I can tell everyone listening in that that's certainly a great place to go. The purpose of today's webinar is really to dig in and share some of our latest research that we're getting into, and just kind of tee that up because there's more to come. But I can certainly share this groundbreaking research. So we've been, I'm sorry?
I said, let's do it.
Oh, I thought you said something. Awesome. Yeah, let's rock and roll. So we've been working with Millward Brown. We're sister companies. We're all under Kantar. And we've been saying, for years, we've been saying that there's so many numbers, so much data, and so much value being driven by understanding employees and also by understanding consumers. And we've kind of been working next to each other, but not as with each other as we'd like. And we know there's value to be had there. So we started looking at, what's really making a difference. So we talked with Millward Brown and found research that they've been doing about what is driving that great brand experience for consumers. And they found that one of the major drivers, once they really dug into the data, was having this top line here, having a friendly and knowledgeable employee base was the largest indicator of whether consumers felt trust in the brand, right? So getting at that meaningful difference and exceeding expectations and feeling valued. So that's really interesting when you think about one of the key drivers of an employee feeling engaged and becoming a brand ambassador was feeling valued as an employee. And they're passing that feeling on to customers of feeling valued also. So it's really becomes this inclusive culture that permeates that kind of employee-customer barrier, if you want to think about it that way. So when we see findings like this, we get really encouraged to keep going, to keep finding that evidence of that relationship between employees and customers, because there's so much to be had there. And honestly, the research is lacking. When we were looking into what others had done in this field, in this area, there was some momentum about 10 years ago. And then, the recession happened, and I think it kind of fell off people's radar. But, meanwhile, all this value has been dormant. So we're picking it up again and getting involved here. So I'll
Brittany,
show you. Yeah.
Great. Keep going.
Okay. So having this friendly and knowledgeable staff in and of itself provided 5% lift in brand equity with customers. And that's that first bullet point here. And what I mean by that is it alone, having, if consumers said that, yes, the staff I interacted with were friendly and knowledgeable, that made a 5% difference in whether or not consumers or customers thought that that brand was worth it, thought that that brand was meaningful, right? They had a emotional connection with it. They felt that it was better or different, at least, from the other competitors out there, and that they would think about it again in the future. So just to provide a little visual here, let's say that all of these little boxes are the driver of what consumers of this organization feel, creates this sense of brand equity, right? Or this sense of this brand is worth it to me to be a consumer with this group. So things like has an appealing loyalty and rewards program. A lot of organizations have that. Is a brand I trust, is a leader in the business, caters to the needs of my group, right? And then other tangible things, faster service, exceeding expectations, makes me feel valued. So these are all questions that Millward Brown asked consumers of this product and this service from this organization. And by the way, this is an organization that we picked specifically for this research because we handle their engagement survey, so we know what their employee data says, and Millward Brown does their brand measurements, so we know what consumers are saying, so we can compare that data. and really see how they're acting. So when we dug into this even deeper, and I apologize for all the lines here, it got a little more spiderwebby than interstate, but the little ribbons here indicate what the top drivers were. So when we looked at, okay, we ask all these questions, but what is really making a difference? What we found was the number one piece was over on the left of that having friendly and knowledgeable employees is what created a brand they trust. Even more so than the other kind of red lines that go to that, like having quality products, exceeding expectations, all those things went into creating a brand that they trusted, but more than anything, it was having friendly and knowledgeable employees. So if we unpack that a little bit, maybe you have high quality products and you have a process that lets customers really speed through that experience or exceed their expectations, that's great. But what happens if I go to the counter at a store and the person is just a monster to me, right? And they're so unhelpful and they create a bad experience. I'm going to remember that forever. And even when we did our research with LinkedIn, we saw that people are 3 times more likely to communicate bad experiences or bad information, right? Like negative information than good. So having knowledgeable and friendly employees was this huge differentiator for customers of whether or not they felt that they could trust this brand and therefore would come back again and again.
This is really interesting. Is this connected to that triad that you guys talk about, which is like feelings, actions, and thinking, or like heart, hands, and head, that you've got to be looking at how all this is interconnected?
Yeah, it really is. So as I said before, this is what the consumer data said. This is what Millward Brown brought to us with their research. And so we said, let's look back at what we know of this organization. So we know what their employees are saying. We know what their top leadership is saying to kind of drive this brand ambassadorship to make all this work, right? So we know that that's driven by supervisors supporting brand experience, experience in training and coaching going on, making sure employees know how to get this to work, and then understanding, what consumers are saying back. So using feedback to make a good experience. So we know that this company is doing the right thing, engaging in all those activities. We know that their engagement scores are high and have continued to increase over time. So when we look at this company with Millward Brown, we know that their brand has increased at the same rate. They've had the same kind of brand growth by all the different measures that they've had with engagements. There's a real connection there. I know that that's correlation, not causation. I'm a scientist, I get it. But it is fascinating to see those two things grow in tandem when you're trying to find, reasons to go dig into this even further. So thinking about that.
I think that was, I was going to say, you use a phrase called winning the talent war, which I think is what that is, right?
It is. So that's exactly what I'm getting into next. So
great.
Thinking about our new offering. Yeah, and that's this triad thing. That's this whole, why are we looking at this model? Okay, Brittany, you've been talking ad nauseum about how brand is important and how employees are part of that kind of brand algorithm or formula of, okay, you have a great brand, that's awesome, you have a product that works, but you need employees to deliver it. So they're kind of a little truck at the end that's going out into the world and going to deliver this great value. And that's true, but that's not all. That's not the end of the story. So as we were working with Millward Brown, that's only half of it. So when we were working with Millward Brown and we're learning more about their model, and this is what we're looking at now, that meaningful difference salient, we're thinking, okay, so you're trying to use this term again, engage consumers by getting at their emotional needs. So that emotional affinity, reflecting thoughts that help decision making. So, oh, should I go to this brand? Yeah, I'm really pulled there. I really like it. It's attractive to me. Differentiation, so delivering on brand benefits others don't, standing out. being salient, so that cognitive piece, that awareness, top of mind, and also knowing that that is what you need. We're looking at this and seeing, this is so similar to our model of employee engagement, which I'll share now. Oops. My apologies, I hit the wrong button. We're back though. So this is our model here, and you'll see it's also 3 pieces. And we've got this head, heart, hands going on, which is the affective piece, the cognitive piece, and the action piece. So I'll walk us through this, and then I'll tie it back to the brand. So starting with this emotional piece, the heart, for feeling. It's how they feel. This is employees again, how they feel about the organization, the dedication to their role, the absorption in their work, right? So when I go to work, I just feel bursting with energy. Time flies. I really like what I'm doing and how I get to do it. And they also trust the organization, right? They're part of this culture. And you talked about this, the culture at Second City, how everyone was, seeing how they fit into the full picture of how Second City works and why it's so magical. And so people are really feeling that and kind of feeding off that energy also to become or to be an engaged employee. The head part then is also this, how they think about the job. So they feel empowered. When I go into work, I know that I get to have some autonomy or some contribution to how my work gets done. I get to be my full self at work. And I also know that I'm rewarded. So it's it's an equitable experience. I know that what I'm doing is valued, and I'm going to be treated fairly and with respect. And then there's this third piece, this behavior, the practice of it. So I'm not sitting at home and thinking, oh, I like work, or, oh, I enjoy my work and I'm empowered by what I do, but I'm acting it. So that practicing of what's going on helps to build that esteem, build those feelings. And this is how not only do organizations engage employees, this is what it looks like to be engaged, but this is how we predict behavior, just like how Millward Brown is helping predict consumer behavior by looking at brand. So to kind of tie that together, we are looking at brand and how organizations pull in and draw in consumers by connecting to them emotionally and mindfully, and by being stand out within the market space, is really the same way that organizations are connecting and drawing in employees, right, in that space. So they're connecting to them emotionally and cognitively and making a difference for them on the internal side of the organization.
All right, you're making me think of something. So the group that we work with at the Center for Decision Research at Chicago Booth is run by Richard Thaler. Thaler wrote the book Nudge. He was also in the film The Big Short, throwing dice with Selena Gomez in the casino.
Awesome.
But this is making me think. This is making me think of Nudge in terms of, and I mean you know this book, which is thinking about behaviors and how we can change those behaviors, not through big giant moves, but through small actions.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So that's kind of the buzz that I've heard recently about, organizations when we're looking at whether or not employees are engaged. And I'll just go back to that for a moment. When we're thinking about engaged employees, we're trying to predict their behavior. And so thinking about what things can we do to create engaging experiences for employees. And so creating those action plans of here's what leaders at different levels in the organization are going to do, are going to start acting differently to create more engaging experiences, right? So if that's senior leadership, creating more trust, if that's a supervisor, creating an open and communicative experience, whatever that looks like, how do you even get started on that? So maybe, you know, you work with Kantar TNS and we help you design a survey that asks questions about communication or relationship with senior leadership or a supervisor, and you get the results back and you say, okay, let's create an action plan around this to start getting better and engaging more of our employees. And sometimes those can be grandiose. That can be, okay, well, we're gonna make employees happier by creating a more open culture. Okay, that's fine, that's a really good ambition, but that's very broad and it can be overwhelming and people may not know where to start. So to your notion of nudging, it's that you need to take steps. You need to start small, start tangible, digestible pieces of behavior change that incrementally and over time build to something that actually works and that is sustainable, right? So just like we want these enduring behaviors from our employees, we need to reinforce that also from the organization side, so this principle of nudge. And so to help with that, what we set up is more broken down action planning. We help provide, you know, what's your first step going to be? Building in some accountability there as well. What's the first thing you need to do? Who are stakeholders you need to involve? So getting a more fleshed out action plan can help with that nudging. And then setting up like reminders for you. I have a friend who has a 14-year-old son and he's at the point where he wants more freedom, but he also needs to take on more responsibility to share that, right? To kind of earn that. Mm-hmm. So he is trying to get into these new behaviors and new practices to demonstrate that he is engaging in sustainable change and a better contribution to this household. And so he's put in his phone, you know, take out the trash, remember to do this. He's putting in little nudges for himself. And then likewise, the organization or the household is rewarding him for those things. So going back to, you know, rewards and driving behavior and motivation, they're providing positive feedback, positive reinforcement for when he completes those actions, like taking out the trash or cleaning up his room or rotating the laundry, whatever that looks like.
That's
I know you have some experience. Yeah.
I was actually recalling an interview I did with Tina Seelig, who's a professor at Stanford, and she had a colleague who was looking to quit smoking, and he realized he needed to create a nudge for himself. So he basically changed his password on his computer to "I need to quit smoking."
And that's a great example, and that's totally that hands piece, right? The act, the practice of it. That, you know, I will type, I need to quit smoking every time I need to access something important. And it just reinforces that this is what I do. And we know from, you know, different psychological research, right, in that field, if it's like the foot in the door, if you do it and you are pursuing that behavior, you're engaging in that behavior, you're going to have so much dissonance, so much stress in your mind if you have to think, okay, I'm doing this thing, but I don't like this thing, or I don't believe in this thing, right? You have to kind of rationalize to yourself, okay, I'm doing this because I want to do it or because I know it's a good thing to do. And so when he's typing, I need to quit smoking, on some level, he's creating that buy-in for himself, that mantra, you know, and building that foundation for actually being able to fulfill that.
Here, I want to ask you one other thing too. You talked about, I saw in here, the term maladaptive behaviors, if I'm saying that correctly. It's a big word. And I think I know what that is, but that's connected here too, right?
It is. So when we're thinking about getting leaders and nudging them towards new behaviors, right, we're thinking about, we're wanting them to develop good behaviors. So new doesn't always mean good. It just means not like it was before. So when you're creating an action plan and thinking, you know, what can we do to make this, because what we're doing wasn't working. So we need to do something else. And when they're creating those action plans and trying to engage in those behaviors, you want to make sure that you're doing the right things. And so maladaptive really means mal, which is the Latin root word for bad, right, or negative. So malice comes from that also. So a maladaptive behavior is a bad new behavior or a bad existing behavior, something that they do or that they created to adapt and survive in an environment that is bad now. So an example of that might be a leader who has come up through the organization because they were super assertive and always spoke their mind and was, kind of the loudest in the room, really making a difference at every turn, and that's why they kept getting promoted and got the visibility that they needed. And so that being kind of loud paid off for them, and so they created those behaviors and honed that skill. But now that they're at the top of the house, maybe this is a CEO or something now, and they're still that aggressive, assertive, loudest person in the room, now it's maladaptive because maybe that organization needs a leader who listens, who's compassionate, who lets other people speak and get some spotlight. So I think that, having leaders, or this is for anyone who have done something to survive or to succeed, and those behaviors then can kind of time out and become maladaptive versus adaptive. And so when we're thinking about creating these behaviors to create engaging environments, it's really nice to have frequent feedback to make sure that what you're doing is still working, or the path you set down when you started action planning and action taking is actually the right thing to be doing, and you're not calling on the wrong behaviors or stale information to inform that. And part of what we do to help with that, not only do we have more robust action planning tools and support structures for that, but we also have this great tool called On Demand. And what that helps with our clients is to send out surveys whenever they need it. So, it's up to your organization to decide what level, but even like line leaders or senior managers or the CEO, anyone who you want to can send out a survey basically saying, how's it going? Let's check and adjust. Let's be agile about this. Let's make sure that what we're doing is working. And if it's working so well that we've solved that problem, we now have a better communication structure, let's move on. Let's not just keep doing these things for another 6 months if we don't need to be doing that anymore and our time is better spent elsewhere. So I think, having that ability to check, refresh, celebrate, all those pieces when you get that constant feedback really helps to validate what you're doing and keep down the right track. And so nudging forward in that new behavior development. And again, making sure you're not developing the wrong stuff, those maladaptive behaviors.
It's really interesting. We talk a lot, because in improvisation, you're in a constant conversation with the audience. And so feedback becomes a thing that's happening instantaneously. And so I think one of the reasons, because people always ask me why so many famous people came out of Second City, and while the answer should be because I hired most of them, and that would do well for me putting money in my pocket, it's not true. I hired many of them, but not all of them. But what it is that this talent, very talented people, become so skilled in improvisational behaviors, which is constant back and forth communication, incredible listening, sort of real-time crowdsourcing, that they take that skill with them when they move on to the next thing. And if you think about people like Tina Fey or Stephen Colbert or Keegan-Michael Key or Amy Poehler, their very successful shows are staffed by other people who are skilled in the same improvisational behaviors. So there's tons of listening, there's tons of constant feedback, multiple modes of communication, because they deal with the written word, they deal with the spoken word, interpersonal stuff. And it looks like what you guys are doing is combining the best of sort of your data understanding, but also your behavior understanding, and going back to a company and saying, hey, mesh all of this to get the most out of your people and to bring the greatest success to your own brand.
That's absolutely right. So what I'm hearing from you is a couple different things, and I love it. So yes, and you're building not only a place where people are really successful because they have these really transferable skills and skills that feed into each other, or at least like areas of expertise, different expertise is in communication and performance and reading the room and reacting to the situation. All that's paramount. But also being in a community of talent where you can feed off of each other, and it's a good experience because it's not just a Tina Fey in a room of people who have no idea what she's doing, right? She needs that group, kind of that organism, to be as successful as possible. And so I think that really plays into this idea that talent draws talent. And so to be an employer of choice or a great place to work, and I'm doing air quotes, no one can see, but to be this great place to work, you need to be, as you said, winning that talent war. And so attracting employees to your brand or your employee value proposition. So basically, just like organizations say to consumers, come to Nike, not the other stores, because we do this for you. We're going to make you this kind of person. If you get to come to us, you're going to be happy, you're going to be stylish, you're going to be cutting edge, higher performing, whatever. Companies do the same thing with employees. They tell them, if you come work for us, you're going to be paid better, or you're going to have more fun. You can bring your dog to work. You're going to feel valued. We have a fun environment. We're a startup. We're Second City. We're the best. So I think you've had, a really unique experience from an employee standpoint in being in such a magical place, in such a unique place that really is that magnet. People come to Chicago just to be with you guys. I think that's really cool. So
yeah, and it's funny too because I'm going to have you jump on this, because I think that magic that I'm talking about is stuff that we didn't know any better. It really sort of happened, but I think at the heart of it is because improvisation, the pedagogy, the learning is everything you've talked about: connection, feedback, listening, focus, back and forth, all that stuff. And then, as we've grown at Second City too, and it's become, harder to manage because we're getting so big, it's realizing that you can't just rely on that instinctually for companies, especially the kind of scale that you talk about with companies like Nike, that they've got to have these kinds of data tools too, to match and to organize and to reach, to scale all their employees.
Exactly. So you talked about, the thing I loved about what you said was, it's great to have that, but you need to crystallize it. You need to make that something you can actually capture and measure. And that's our business. That's what Kantar TNS does. We're all about measuring and getting evidence, right, for that evidence-based management and best practices. So the outcome of this work with Millward Brown has been that we've done this mapping here, meaningful is that emotional connection, that heart. Salient is exactly what we're talking about when we're talking about head, or that cognitive connection, that buy-in of, I know this is good for me. And hands, right, that really driving productivity, performance, retention. We were struck with how well our two models fit in with each other when you're talking about understanding what is motivating and connective for people, what gets them in the door and keeps them there. And also, how do you predict behavior? So how do you predict return clients? How do you predict higher turnover or higher engagement? Lower turnover, higher retention, and engagement with employees. And so we kind of, just like we're doing a mashup today with TNS and Second City, we're doing a mashup of brand and employees and adapting the measure that Millward Brown has used for so long and so successfully with consumers. We're adapting that to work with employees. So we've taken their items and worked with them extensively to make sure that we're abiding by all the research they've done and using all the validation that they've been so successful with getting and all their lessons learned over the years, and building that into our new service offerings. So we're shortly here in the next few weeks going to be able to help our customers understand and really measure how successful are we being as an employer at having our employees understand, believe in, and deliver on our brand. So it's a little bit of internal consumer of your internal brand. So is your employee value proposition being delivered successfully? Are you creating good experiences for your employees? Are you an attractive employer, right? Are you a great place to work? And then understanding a little bit, also mash up with net promoter scores, things we all know and love, employee engagement indexes, so making sure that you can see how engagement is playing into that and getting evidence for that, because we also know what's driving engagement, helps it drive internal consumer brand behavior. I'm kind of getting into the weeds, but it's a really neat tool that's going to be very powerful for our client organizations to help understand the employee side of brand and not just the consumer side of brand, because that data is so related and so powerful.
So we are, we got a little bit left, and I want to toss a couple of things that have just sort of come to mind as I've been jotting notes about this. So these might be a little bit of wild card, but are you ready for it? Okay.
I sure am.
One of the insights that I've really been interested in from the world of behavioral science is this idea around, it's called self-verification theory. And I think you know about this, and I think it is connected to this. So as I understand it, most of us have sort of thought, I think for generations, that we want to be seen as our best selves, our prettiest, our smartest, our coolest, all that. But self-verification theory tells us something different. It tells us that we want to be seen as we actually see ourselves. So the example of that is, if I see myself as clumsy, it's very important that you see me as clumsy so you don't throw me a ball, which is different than the other, right? And so it's not that we, because not all of us have like this great image of ourselves. So that feels to me like one of these insights and these behaviors that if someone were to understand as an employee, their whole sense of like a performance through a feedback, a communication is going to be different.
Yeah, I really like that. I'm just reflecting for a moment on that. Self-verification theory is really interesting. And when you expand that out from the individual and think about implications of those thought experiments with organizations and cultures, you're thinking, okay, everyone wants the brand of we are, we're the best in the world. We're the Ritz of whatever. We're the Ritz of mufflers, right? Or something like that. But not everyone needs that gold star brand. Maybe you're a cost competitor. Maybe you are faster. Maybe you are higher quality or a longer term payoff for your investment. There's all different kinds, sizes, shapes, colors of organizations. And so another thing our clients have been hammering home for us and that we're paying attention to is this need to understand your culture. So I'm kind of drawing it back to who you really are. Not just, oh, Brittany's a great person or Kelly's a great person, but who are they? If Kelly is clumsy or Kelly is brilliant, but you need to kind of open him up and talk to him a little bit. I'm not saying this is the case. You're fantastic at Go. But, having people understand that so they can react to you constructively, work with you well, and have that expectation set. So again, that employee value proposition. So we're going to say who we are, we're going to say why that's valuable, and then we're going to deliver on that so that you have an equitable experience, your expectations are met, and you can make an informed decision and have a good experience here. So that informed decision, again, that cognitive alignment, the salient alignment, and also you're going to like it here. You're going to enjoy your experience, and you're going to contribute meaningfully. So that emotional connection as well. So I think that really plays into what we're talking about here.
Yeah, and Scott, I know you're there to chime in on these questions, and I just saw one which was talking about the difference between employee brand and the employer brand, and I think that's kind of what you're talking about, is sort of stretching this thing out with self-verification theory, that as you build that out in these sort of concentric circles of audiences, they are all interconnected. And that's a really sort of interesting take that I hadn't thought about.
Yeah, interesting. So employee brand and employer brand. So I think that question's getting at employer brand is, the brand that they put out there externally. So what does it mean to be a consumer at Nike versus
Right.
the employee brand, or the brand they espouse to employers, like, okay, if you work at Nike, it means this other thing. And so, while they are related, this is a fun company, fun place to work. Why do I go shop at a certain store? It's because their employees are really fun, and they're having a great time, and I know they're being paid well. And that's a culture, it's a community I want to align myself with. I'm the kind of person who shops like at Trader Joe's or something.
Interesting. Hey, Brittany, this has been a fantastic conversation. I think we're tying it up now. But thank you for allowing me to semi-understand the sciences in such a way as to, keep the conversation going. But I think there's really valuable stuff and important stuff as well for businesses that, need to grow in a very sort of, everything's changing, and our understanding of how things are working are changing. And it sounds like this is just really valuable tools for moving brands forward and making for happier employees.
Thank you, Kelly. Yeah, I love how we did this today. I'm so glad you joined us, because this really is an exploration. Like we've been talking about, the research here is not what we see in a lot of other areas of this field. We see a lot of really robust findings, but this is a little dark. It's a little gray. So we're bringing some light to this, and we're definitely going to keep the conversation going and bring our clients ways that they can understand it for themselves.
Great, thank you. Hey, Scott, I'm going to have you wrap it up.
Wonderful. Thanks, everybody, and thanks, Kelly and Brittany, for coming in today. Brittany, if you could switch to kind of our upcoming events, I'll announce those, and then we'll pass it back over.
Be happy to.
It should be. Yeah.
Yeah. It's coming up.
There we go. All right, so everybody, we have 2 events coming up, July 12th and 13th. We have another webinar, Continuous Listening and Action Planning, Surveying at the Right Time. And then also we will be in California on July 24th at the HCI Employee Engagement Conference. Brittany will be leading a client panel called Life in the Engagement Fast Lane, Breeze Through Crisis and Accelerate Your Investments. Brittany, if you could head to the next slide. There we go. With us will be representatives, client representatives from Hearthside, Enterprise Rent-A-Car, and Compass Group. So we're really looking forward to that. Brittany, I know you're excited to have those 3 panelists and really get into kind of the gritty details of engaging your employees day to day, continuous listening, and really making changes when it's really needed within the organizations. So I'd like to thank both Kelly and Brittany for being with us today, and thank HR.com for putting on this great webinar for us. And I will hand it back to Kathy from HR.com.
Well, thank you, Scott, and thanks to Kantar TNS and all of our guest speakers today for this great presentation. Just a few reminders for the attendees. If you would like to view this webcast again, the archive recording will be available on site for up to 7 days. The slides are also available to download. Your webcast credits are stored in your HR.com account. Watch for your email to arrive within 1 to 2 business days. It will contain the certification credit information. Your feedback is important to us. Please take a moment and fill out the exit survey that will appear on your screen. This concludes today's webcast. Enjoy the rest of your day.